to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
This is Professor Robert D'Agostino with Do Facts Matter. And of course, as I always say, if you're a leftist, facts don't matter at all. And we're seeing that recently in the last week with these alleged demonstrations, which have turned into, of course, riots, looting, or as someone put it, evening shopping sprees. Anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about that and look a bit about the truth. Let me just say this before we start the show more formally. And keep this in mind as we discuss this. 6% of the population are black males. 44% of murders are done by black males. And most of those people who are murdered are other black males. 93 to 96% of those people who are murdered are murdered by blacks who are murdered by other blacks. So I think if you want to talk about a discussion about race, we need to talk about facts. And with that, I have my desk of last week is back again. It's Will Harris. And Will Harris, of course, has got a great resume about traveling around the world, flying planes, and actually observing the behavior of people all over the world, including being in the midst of a riot or two. Will, you there?
I'm here.
Oh, well, let's give me some of your observations about what you've seen around the world as a result of this kind of rioting, this kind of mayhem, this kind of looting. Certainly we're not unique in having that in this country, although the frequency in this country seems to be picking up and the severity. What is your take?
Well, what I've seen is, for example, here there seem to be more than one group responsible. We have some very malicious players, the Antifa, and I believe there's some other groups as well, but they're very malicious. Then we have some other groups that are just strictly seem to be trying to steal and rob and get a new iPhone.
Well, as Banfield, the famous sociologist who did a study of rioting some years ago in the 1960s, said there's a cohort of people who attend these things just for the entertainment of it. Young males, white males, black males, they seem to enjoy the entertainment, the baiting the police. If you take a look at the pictures of some of the rioters, notice how many white folks there are, white young males there are. And if you looked in Atlanta in the first or second night, they had some films, and here's all these white males in their expensive SUVs who had come in from the suburbs to join the fun. So you have a whole cohort that is entertainment for them. And of course you have another cohort that also take advantages of these demonstrations and the entertainment of starting a riot by looting or shopping in the evening without money, whatever you want to call it. But go ahead.
Moneyless shopping. I've also been quite surprised to see the amount of women that are getting right in the policeman's face and flipping them off, and it's fascinating to me what's going on here, and most of it is coming. I mean, what I look by going through all the main information networks is there are a few of our media outlets that really, in a world that was correct and where there was justice, they should be prosecuted for inciting. The things that I don't know if I should say the names or the broadcasters or the talking heads' names.
Well, try Don Lemon. Try CNN's Don Lemon as a name. Go ahead.
Well, that's one. Yes, and he is probably the worst. I also turned on MSNBC in the height of all the worst of it in New York City. And I had just been on Fox, and they were showing a camera angle that came from the rear and above, and you could clearly see there were 3 or 4 rows of the people dressed in regular clothes, and then mixed in from behind that were the people with the black outfits, and you could clearly see them throwing what I'm told is frozen water bottles and rocks, and it was very clear they were using the other people as a shield. And then I just wanted to see how the different networks were taking this, and on my cable, MSNBC is right next to Fox, so the first click I went to MSNBC. They had a camera angle coming from the side right next to the few rows of the kids in normal clothes that were just holding signs and not being malicious at all. And they shot the whole scene where you couldn't see the water bottles flying over their head and the rocks and the other things they were doing. And then the tear gas starts flying, and they're saying, oh, for no reason, they're tear gassing us. I mean, it was just amazing. Then later on, MSNBC, I don't know any of their people's names, but it was kind of a guy that looked like George Costanza, kind of a chunky guy, and he's marching with the protesters. He's with the belligerent group, of course, and he states, well, curfew just came, and we're not going anywhere, and then the police come and start pushing the entire brigade of protesters down the street. And he said, here they are for no reason, pushing us down the street, getting us off the street, after he had just said that it's curfew. It's just fascinating, and that the people that watch that are unable to put that together. Well, it's curfew, you're breaking the law. It's just absolutely fascinating, and I think part of it goes into the way people are educated in America today. Their cognizant thought, reasoning is not taught. As some of the early day liberals said, we've got to educate people to be a good workforce. We don't want to educate them to be leaders. Those were the people that I guess went to private school. But to me, it is absolutely fascinating that people are unable to see through this, and that they just take it and it's all gospel truth. And then some of the other players right now that are, to me it's very clear. General Mattis had a beautiful career, but he and Trump are two of the same thing. They're identical type personalities. And Mattis stuck it to Trump this week. Well, they're playing it up as, his whole cabinet's falling apart. They're all turning on him. And again, how they believe this, I just don't understand.
Well, let me make a couple of comments, because you brought up a really a series of very interesting observations and comments. The first about the number of women, the number of girls who are involved in baiting the police and involved in these riots. There's a philosopher, a French philosopher, and I forgot which one it was, who said that civilization was invented by men to impress women. And if women no longer are interested in civilization, then men will no longer be interested in impressing them with civilization, and hence civilization starts to fall apart, which is exactly what's happening right now, and in various parts of the world, most particularly in the United States. I can remember reading a few years back about a projection by an ethnographer that the United States would eventually split into 4 or 5 different countries. And I couldn't conceive of it then. This is probably about 10 years ago. I can conceive of it now. I really can. And as far as the media, they're part and parcel. There's a global leadership, a globalist leadership. I shouldn't call globalists, who care not a whit about the United States. Although they're supposedly American citizens, they dominate the Wall Street, they dominate the coasts, and their particular goal is a global government, and with complete control of the deplorables, who will then work in factories for minimal wages to continue enriching the ultra rich. Facts don't matter, and that's really true in colleges and universities. That's right. Facts don't matter. Then we don't educate most of our citizens anymore. We propagandize them. No education.
Indoctrinate.
Yes, we indoctrinate, propagandize. We give them a credential. To be credentialed doesn't mean you're educated. And I think it's purposeful. I remember some years ago when my son had applied to Tufts in Massachusetts, and I went and he decided to go to Tufts against my advice, by the way. He transferred out of Tufts after the first year and went to a University of Texas, which suited his personality and his leadership ability a lot better. But anyway, I went to this parents' weekend before school started, and this little professor gets up there, and she starts talking about, oh, this is so exciting. We want to make things interesting for students. We want to really know how they feel. And my response to that was, do you want to know what they know? There's no interest in facts. There's no interest in teaching them real history. It's how they feel. And you can always use left-wing rhetoric to make people feel good. Everybody's equal, says the socialists, while the people who run the country live in luxury and ordinary folks are impoverished. See Venezuela for a recent example. I think it's very troubling at this point. We have a lot of violence going on, and people talk about police brutality, which is nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Bill, go ahead.
Well, part of that, I think, has to do that this is clearly a long-term plan, like the feminization of the American male in the 80s and 90s and the Clinton years. If you look into the psyche of a male and a female, women feel, men think, men analyze, women feel. So they've taught men to feel. Everything that's happened, everything from Hollywood, everything from the media, it's all been to get men to be controllable. They can't have any wolves. They have to have sheep. And as far as the globalism goes, I don't know exactly how you find it, but 60 Minutes did an interview with George Soros many years ago. And he talked about how, in Germany when the Nazis took over, and he is a Jew, that he turned his neighbors in because when they sent them to the concentration camps, they gave him their stuff. And they also gave him protection. And he talks about that openly, like, what's wrong with that? I got their stuff. I got protection. So, if that could get, I'm pretty sure you can find it. I've seen it on the internet. But the more people that see who George Soros really is...
Okay, hold that thought, because I want to pursue that thing about George Soros. We're up against a hard break. We'll be right back with Do Facts Matter.
Whether cruising the strip in a 57 Chevy or taking the family on a vacation in a 71 Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, you need to tune in to Classic Cars with Steve Ronaldo and Jim Weber every Saturday from 8 to 9 a.m. on americaswebradio.com.
Want to give your family or loved one the perfect gift? Then go online and check out the TornadoBodyDryer.com. I love mine and the warm heat air massage it gives me after my shower. The Tornado Body Dryer is super. You'll love it, and you'll love having one in your shower.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
This is Robert D'Agostino, Professor Robert D'Agostino, Atlanta's John Marshall Law School with Do Facts Matter. I don't know if I should mention my affiliation in view of what happened the last couple of days, which I'll go into in a minute. But let's go back to George Soros for a moment. Obviously, George Soros has a history that is less than honorable. And in fact, he's been thrown out of 3 countries for currency manipulation. So most of his wealth is based on, first, getting it, let's say, from others when he didn't earn it, and 2, manipulating currencies and I don't know if he's in the hedge funds too, but certainly not doing anything productive. Yet he's got billions of dollars, recently having transferred $18 billion of his personal wealth into a foundation to advance left-wing causes. But that's exactly why he's not held to account, because he's embraced left-wing causes. You can be run out of the U.S. Senate for patting a female staffer on the behind if you're a Republican. You can go ahead and rape women and assault them and with credible accusers, and you become president of the United States as long as you are a Democrat and play along with the left. Will, is that right?
Yeah, that is right. I think he's been thrown out of more countries than that, though. There were some things he did with currency manipulation in Asia.
Thailand, yeah, I think he got pretty much kicked out of there. United Kingdom,
and I think France or Germany, wasn't it?
I don't remember the third one at this point. I don't think it was either France or Germany. I think it was an Eastern European country, but I don't remember.
Well, there's at least one more country.
Yes.
My question is, and if anyone's interested in what's infuriating with what's going on, is why no one gets prosecuted. If Cuomo or de Blasio were Republicans, they would be people marching in the street demanding that they're tried for murder. That's on just simply on what they did around COVID, when de Blasio in March was saying, come to New York, it's great, come to the restaurants. They wanted the money from the St. Patrick's Day. The mayor of New Orleans did the same thing. De Blasio sent COVID patients to the nursing homes. Why does Soros not get prosecuted? Why does de Blasio not get prosecuted? Why does Cuomo not get prosecuted? It gets people really frustrated, and I think Bill Barr is doing a good job, but, some indictments need to drop.
Well, first of all, I don't think Cuomo has necessarily done anything illegal, although he should suffer political consequences and criticism for what he's done. As far as Barr is concerned, I don't have really any faith in Attorney General Barr. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, but where's the prosecutions for obviously criminal behavior when they haven't even indicted the particular attorney who forged an email in order to harass Carter Page? Forged it, and he hasn't been indicted for anything. I mean, Attorney General Barr talks an interesting game, but my feeling is no one or almost no one will suffer the consequences of their illegal and criminal behavior. Look at the Clintons. The Clintons have gotten away with criminal behavior for years, 30 years, 40 years, taking bribes when he was president, for Pete's sakes. Hillary Clinton, if you're an attorney and your client asks you, they're investigating me, should I destroy the emails? No, that's a felony. Should I destroy the computer that these emails are on? No, you can't do that. You're under investigation. But she did all of that, and nothing happened. So I think, there's certainly 2 levels of justice in this country, and one...
Well, that's where people get frustrated. We're supposedly a nation of laws, but apparently we're only a nation of laws if your name has an R after it.
Well, I think that seems to be true, and we're seeing that right now. One of the interesting things I want to address. By the way, before I address this, you've been in some countries where there's been a lot of unrest.
Well, I was very close to I was in Mombasa, Kenya, which when the troops were being cut up into pieces and dragged through the streets, and Bill Clinton, it would have been, we had tanks, we had all the assets, where it was very similar to what his wife did in Benghazi. We had the assets. There were people standing there, let us go, let us go, let us go. And he would not roll the tanks. They killed our troops brutally, cut their bodies into pieces, drug them through the streets, which, of course, there's nothing like absolute brutality to incite people thinking that they're doing the right thing when they're absolutely doing the unconscionable wrong thing. But that's probably the worst that I've ever seen. Although,
there was an interesting, on your point that you just made, which is really interesting. Some years ago, a professor at University of Texas named Budiashevsky wrote an article about called The Revenge of Conscience. You can look it up on the internet, listeners who might be interested. His name is Budiashevsky, the article, University of Texas professor, The Revenge of Conscience. And he pointed out, as you do terrible things, your conscience actually justifies it, and you do even worse things as you go along. And he was, of course, talking about one of the things he was talking about was abortion, killing unborn babies, which now is the governor of Virginia, and the new legislation in New York essentially allows infanticide. And our former president, Barack Obama, voted when he was in the Illinois legislature, refused to support legislation that would have protected babies born alive. And he even at one point, look it up, interviews, well, if it's a botched abortion and the baby's born alive, well, it's up to the mother and the doctor. And one state, I think, may have passed this legislation recently, is going to grant.
Alabama has put up some pretty strong legislation against that. But the way I understand it, in New York and I believe Virginia as well, that a mother can say, I don't want this baby, and they can deliver a healthy baby, and they'll take it. The way I understand it, they will take it and lay it, make it comfortable, but not give it anything, any treatment until it dies.
Well, that's what Northam, the governor of Virginia, said, and that's apparently one interpretation of the New York legislation. And there's a state, and I don't know, that I think just passed a law allowing for a lawsuit for wrongful botched abortion. And what it really means is that if the baby's born alive, the doctor can be sued. And now you're a doctor, you're doing an abortion, you're going to let the baby be born alive so you get a lawsuit on your hands? I don't think so.
No, you're going to slit its little throat.
Well, they do that routinely in California in order to sell the head. They, intake the baby's heads are worth a lot of money. And you think I'm not telling the truth? There's a transcript where people from Planned Parenthood admit that that's going on. Go look it up.
They're selling the parts, the way I understand it.
Well, they sell the parts, but if the baby's born alive, the parts are fresh. And how do you get an intact head? A lot of abortions, you just crush the head, so you crush the brain. Well, if the head is worth a lot of money, you want the baby born with the head. So you do what you just said. You slit the throat.
And retinas and
you slit the throat, just what you said, and you cut the head off. Right. It's going on. The Thomas More Society, MORE, is defending people who have been sued because they have exposed this trade in body parts, which is illegal. This killing born babies, which is illegal, even in California at this point. And so it's the Thomas More, MORE Society. Look it up. Look it up. Their cases involving the lawsuits against a couple of their clients in California for exposing illegal activity. So they're the ones getting sued, and they've got Judge Orrick, who's in the pocket of Planned Parenthood, made sure the jury found against these people who exposed illegal activities and testified to. Just amazing what's going on in the country today. But let's get back to what's going on now. What have you seen? You've been in other countries where there was unrest. You saw what was going on in
Well, yesterday, where I am on the coast of South Carolina, I saw two different demonstrations. Most seem to be attended by high school age young white and black kids that were holding signs and being peaceful, and I support that 1,000%. Didn't see anything unpeaceful here, although what I saw happening in Atlanta, the police officer that was killed yesterday, it's beyond appalling to me that all this is being aggrandized and people seem to think it's fine.
Yes, so we have a career criminal, George Floyd, killed by police in a horrible, horrible situation. But how about the 11 or 12 people who died in these riots, most of whom are innocent African Americans, innocent blacks? What about them? They get no publicity. They get nothing.
I believe most of them are black as well.
Well, of course, most of them are black. And what about them? What about them?
Well, the leftist theory is, well, you got to break an egg to make an omelet. And all these people think that if their side was successful, that they would be heroes, and they'd be aggrandized and be given 70 virgins or whatever the liberal version of that is, kind of the same thing. But the truth is, they would probably be killed off pretty quickly. The people, once they got control, wouldn't want anybody that's radical or going to possibly work against them.
Well, let's see.
Plus, they don't want to give away any of the power. They want it all for themselves.
Exactly. And let's say history shows what the left does to their allies. In Russia, once the Bolsheviks were able to dominate the government, they promptly killed the Mensheviks, right? The Mensheviks were reformists, were socialists, leftists, and they believed in democracy. Well, that's false consciousness. They have to go. And after the hard break we're about to have, I'll tell you a little story about a fellow named Alexander Neckham.
You can keep your doctor, you can keep your plan, and every family will save thousands of dollars a year. I'm Ellen Deal, and if you've been hurt by the Affordable Care Act, you can email MAGA45CAG@gmail.com to see if we can help. Small business owners, individuals, families, and baby boomers, email MAGA45CAG@gmail.com for 3 easy questions to determine if you can get away from Obamacare. I'm a 20-year veteran of the insurance industry and here to help you for all your insurance needs.
Get your pen and paper ready. If there's a move in your near future, I'm here to tell you that the folks I used and now recommend is Around Town Movers. Timothy and the guys recently moved me, and I am and was totally satisfied with a sometimes not so fun experience moving. Call Timothy at 770-378-4708 and make it a good move and a good experience. Around Town Movers for that local or cross-country move. Timothy, Around Town Movers, in my opinion, are the best. That's Around Town Movers. Call them. This is America's Web Radio. Would you like to have a show, talk about your business, or express your opinion on America's Web Radio? Just email gm@americaswebradio.com and we'll get back to you. Thank you.
Professor Robert D'Agostino back with Do Facts Matter. And I was, we were talking about how the left will turn on each other left-wing groups, in order to achieve complete power. And Alexander Neckham comes to mind. Alexander Neckham was the Minister of Finance after World War II in Hungary, and he was a leader of what was called the Peasant Party, and the Peasant Party was allied with the Communists and a kind of a Popular Front left-wing group. Well, once the Communists took control of the government, they immediately turned against the Peasant Party, and Alexander Neckham had to flee Hungary with his wife, and they just got out before they were shot. And so this is typical. Stalin, when the Russian troops moved into Eastern Europe, Stalin told his leadership that they were to put the former Nazis in charge because they knew how to run the country. So if you take a look at the post-World War II Austrian Socialist Party, it was dominated by ex-Nazis because that's who the communists wanted to control the country, the natives, the people who knew how to run the country. Yes, they were Nazis. They knew how to run the country, and they knew how to run the country the way Stalin wanted it run. And so we see that all the time. Now, what's this going on now, William? We got this, We got this defund the police going on? What's all this about?
Anarchy.
Yes.
And I think I think that we are still the majority. I was talking to some liberals yesterday, and I start getting them to tell me their values, and they're actually Republicans. They're just so brainwashed they watch CNN, and they think a good bit of the Democratic Party are actually brainwashed Republicans. And one point as to what you were just talking about that it made me remember clearly is one of the biggest misconceptions is that the Nazis were right-wing. The definition of fascism has become right-wing. Fascism has nothing to do with what side you're on. Fascism has to do with an undying belief in a system. Mussolini was a fascist. Hitler was a fascist. But the big misconception out there right now is that the Nazis were right-wing. The Nazis were pure and simple socialist, and there's clues to this day right there in front of you, the way the socialists always have the people's this and the people's that. Well, the car that Hitler personally supervised inventing, the Volkswagen, if you translate that translates to the people's car. The Nazis were socialists. They never were anything but socialists. When Hitler was elected and they came into the Bundestag, which is the house in Germany, they seated them on the right side because their party name had the word nationalist in it. But the party was the National Socialist Party. That's what Nazi came from. So any work that people out there can do to educate people about the Nazis, that they were actually quite far left and not right-wing at all, and that fascism has nothing to do with right-wing or left-wing. But if you look it up on any of the dictionaries of today, which would include Google and things like that, the first word will be hard right-wing. Total brainwashing, totally false, and you have great knowledge about that. I wish you would speak to that for just a moment, and then we'll get back to what we're seeing in America.
Well, Mussolini actually said, talking about the economic theories, he said fascism was the halfway house to socialism. Mussolini was the head of a socialist group in Italy before he took power, and what happened is this brand of socialism became also directed at ethnic superiorities, and so the utopian scheme. These are all left-wing utopian schemes. The utopian scheme for Hitler, economically, of course, was socialism, but ethnically was a society dominated by Germans. All Germans are equal; everybody else is unequal. Whereas communism, same economic policies, the same totalitarian outlook as the Nazis, except that all people are equal, not just Germans or Russians. Although Stalin, as you know, he spent a good part of his initial years in power, Russifying the rest of the population. This idea of multicultural didn't sit well with Joseph Stalin. He knew multicultural meant division and dispute among peoples. So one of the first things he did, I mean, how did the Ukraine get such a huge Russian population? Well, Stalin, what did he do? He starved 7 million Ukrainians to death and moved Russians into eastern Ukraine in order to dominate Ukraine with ethnic Russians rather than Ukrainians. So that's why Western Ukraine is still Ukrainian. Eastern Ukraine is, to a large extent, Russified, a lot of Russians. So, in terms of being in power, there's no difference. The left, whether you call them Nazis or fascists or communists, they all govern in the same way, and they're all socialists. They're all utopian thinkers. They just have a different definition of utopia. And let me point out to you that Mussolini, when he came to power, was welcomed by the progressives all over Europe and America as he made the trains run on time. He was proving that the government was a rational way to run a country, and rather than the market, and rather than having people make their own decisions, apparently. So he was welcomed by the progressives, and so was Hitler. When Hitler first came, there was a lot of progressives that said, well, he's going to straighten things out in Germany. He'll make things better for the common folk. He's a good socialist. And some of the people who visited Hitler initially were the progressives from this country. And one has to remember that one of the crucial policy positions of the progressives was eugenics. How do we get rid of the inferior people and inferior races? Hitler, of course, was busy at the time that American progressives visited Hitler. Hitler was busy getting rid of retarded people and getting rid of people who were disabled because of World War I injuries, soldiers, fellow soldiers. Yet the progressives thought this was perfectly okay, justified. He was going to make a better country with a better quality of people. Talking about that, those of you out there who think that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is such a wonderful person, take a look at her interview with the New York Times a couple of years ago when she was asked about abortion. And other than supporting it as a population control measure, she also said, after all, abortion eliminates people in a population we want fewer of. Look it up. Those are her words, not mine. Look it up. Will, go ahead.
Well, I get so many points when I listen to that. One is the Nazis. If you listen to Hitler's speech, now he spoke Altdeutsch, the old German, which I took a great deal of care when I was studying in Germany to learn enough of it to understand his speeches, because I wanted to hear them undiluted. And he always would scream, and you can hear it quite clearly if you listen to any of his speeches, "Wir seid Arya." We are the Aryan race. Although he was not. He had brown hair and brown eyes, but he wanted to create this super race of Aryans, blonde-haired, blue eyes. And the Nazis were used, they divided the people, just like we are here today, by creating a common enemy. And that day it was Jews and blacks. Today it's still Jews. One of the things that totally flummoxes me is why the Jews vote Democrat. Obama had institutionalized anti-Semitism. Look what's happening in Israel right now. So they create an enemy. Today it's white men. You can go down the list of their people that number one on the list is white men.
No, wait a minute, William. Heterosexual white men.
Heterosexual white men.
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly right. So the parallels, and I think I spoke about this last week as well, the parallels between the American left today and the Nazis are absolutely astounding. If you can go through and get, people say, well, research it, and they say, go to what is it, Smurfs or Snopes or something. It's the information in there is just totally, it's just a bunch of propaganda. You probably have to get a textbook from the 50s or 60s to find one where they haven't diluted it. But the platform of the Nazis was incredibly similar.
Oh yeah, they were big environmentalists. Yes, Hitler was a big environmentalist. No question about it.
Anti-gun.
Yeah. Yeah.
But today's left, and another thing I thought about when you were speaking is that, you know, people will jump on and say, well, you had some good Republicans, Theodore Roosevelt. Well, Theodore Roosevelt was actually founded something called the Bull Moose Party, and the Bull Moose Party was progressives.
But that was after he was president.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, did Taft oppose him after that? Or
Yes, we have Theodore Roosevelt running as Bull Moose to thank for Woodrow Wilson, one of the most disastrous presidents in American history. William Howard Taft would have been reelected if Theodore Roosevelt had not formed a third party called the Bull Moose Party. And he split the Republican vote, allowing Woodrow Wilson, a complete disaster, to be elected president. A racist, someone who resegregated the federal government, someone who got us into World War I, which led to World War II. No Woodrow Wilson, we're not in World War I. That war comes to an end without a worldwide conflagration, and then there's no World War II. You know, John Maynard Keynes, who's brilliant, was at Versailles, and he absolutely said that there'd be a continuation of World War I. He said,
yeah, World War I created World War II.
Right, and Woodrow Wilson got us into World War I when he shouldn't have. Make the world safe for democracy. Every single president who wanted to make the world safe for democracy, Woodrow Wilson, John Kennedy in Vietnam, and the second Bush, have led us into disastrous wars, disastrous entanglements. Ronald Reagan spoke a good, spoke in the language of sometimes idiocy about but never was suckered into thinking that the United States could reform a country, United States, without occupying it. Obviously, we reformed Germany by occupying it. We reformed Japan by occupying it. And the only time Haiti had a government that really operated well was when the Marines ran Haiti for a while. But Reagan knew that nation building was a myth of absent occupation, and he wasn't going to do that. But no, we had Woodrow Wilson, World War I. We had John Kennedy, Vietnam War, aided and abetted by, of course, Lyndon Johnson, who knew he shouldn't have been there. Then we had the second Bush. Well, he's going to create a new democratic Iraq. Yeah, sure.
Well, they brutalized him when he was in office, but if you look, it's obvious he's a globalist. If you look at the comments he's having right now, he's supporting all this rioting. And the second Bush, I never could understand him. They would sit there in these news conferences and just throw out these absolute lies, and he would just stand there and look at them. The current press secretary of the White House, I can't remember her name. She's only 32 years old.
McInerney, yes.
She is absolutely brilliant. I just love the way she just knocks them down, and she's always, it's like she knows the stupid questions they're going to ask her, and she has tape repudiating it right there and just plays it on the screen of them saying the opposite of what they're saying now, and she's wonderful.
Well, I hope
it makes me happy.
I hope it does some good. Right now I'm not sure. Here's what I sense, and I don't know if you sense this too. And my friends think I'm a pretty good guy looking at political trends, and I think that a week ago or 2 weeks ago I would have bet that the Democrats would sweep everything: the House, the Senate, the presidency, even the presidency with an Alzheimer's patient. That had a good chance of winning the presidency. I think there's been a change in the air. I think there's been a turn away from and a realization of what the Democrats, especially are doing. undercutting the police, justifying looting and violence. The number of murders the rioters are committing is rising. And maybe if Attorney General Barr will finally get off his butt and do something about Antifa and the other groups, the radical wing of the Black Lives Matter movement and a few other movements. By the way, those of you out there who are interested in finding out how these people are funded and how they're connected with each other, David Horowitz Freedom Center has done a pamphlet about that. That's David Horowitz's Freedom Center. In fact, maybe I'll bring that study with me next week, and we can go through it on the show. But with the funding, these are well-funded people. And by the way, when you look at the TV, spot the people with black masks covering all their face and backpacks, because those backpacks contain very sophisticated communications equipment and cameras. And so if you see someone in black, particularly all black-faced and with a backpack, then look at their head, green, yellow, black, and that is a signal as to what their role is. Their role is to create mayhem, throw the rocks, throw the bottles, or is their role to cover up for those people, or is their role to stir the pot with innocent, who initially anyway, innocent demonstrators who then might be encouraged to become violent. You watch them. When I watch some of this, I point out to my wife. I say, "Now look, that's Antifa right there. Black mask on face, look, black hat, black, and that one's Antifa too. Look at the backpack. They always have these big backpacks full of sophisticated cameras and communications equipment." Will, go ahead.
Well, in the Civil War, some of the generals had different divisions in their group, people that did different things. These people would all have a black horse. These people would all have a roan horse. These people would all, so that he could sit on the hill and identify his people. And that's the same with Antifa. There's somebody watching somewhere that's choreographing the whole thing. The good part that comes from this, as the Democrats want to do, they seem to have overplayed their hand. America's getting a first, right as they're saying we need to have no police in the middle of anarchy, people are getting to see what anarchy looks like, and nobody wants it. So I think they've overplayed their hand, and what I pray for is that Trump gets reelected with a mandate, and that he gets rhino-proof majorities in both houses so that he can really get something done. He's proved himself time and time again to be a man of the people, even the people that are just stabbing him in the back. And he's doing his job every day. He's honored all his promises, and he's doing his job every day with a pack of rabid chihuahuas nipping at his heels. And he somehow, I just can't imagine if I was elected president and then it's being broadcast by leaders of the Democrats that my 10-year-old son should be gang raped by homosexuals, my wife was a whore, I'm an idiot, all these horrible things, holding up my severed head. I don't think I could be as nice as he is. And they say he's coarse, he's a New Yorker, but with what he's had to endure, I really don't think I would be as nice to him as he is. I really don't. No,
I agree with you, and of course, sometimes he steps in it with his own rhetoric and tweets. But I agree.
He's a coarse, old-school New Yorker. They didn't take much baloney, and that's the way they are. We had Obama that was quite eloquent and that spoke well, and he would only tread on the toes of conservatives. So he was the darling of all these people. I'd rather have a coarse son of a bitch that tells the truth, does what he says, and doesn't destroy the country.
Yeah,
I'd
and
take
of course,
that any day over an eloquent traitor.
Yes, and I think that's a good word for Barack Obama in a sense, because he politicized the Justice Department, politicized the FBI, politicized the IRS, politicized the CIA.
Weaponized and politicized.
Yes, it's just right. It's just absolutely incredible. Well, before we leave, though, Bill, I want to talk to you about what you're up to now, because you are up to something interesting now. You're a very creative person. And tell us about what you're up to now. I think it's an interesting thing for the listeners to hear about, and they'll hear about more of it from America's Web Radio in the future once you're ready to launch your business. What is it?
Well, for many years, I built buildings, I renovated buildings, I designed all sorts of stuff. And I always noticed that when we would do the demolition of these buildings, there were these people that would come, and they always wanted the air conditioning units, which we were throwing away, and they would take them apart because they had copper and various types of metals that could be resold. And when they would open these air conditioning units up to take that cooling coil out, what I saw was appalling. And I'm thinking, we're taking our air in our homes and our buildings, blowing it through this mat of fungus and mold and bacteria, and then blowing it in our babies' faces. So I started in 2001 developing a way to prevent that. And the first machines I built had ceramic disc, and we actually created small lightning strikes in the air conditioner machine, which created ozone, and the ozone killed the stuff. But that was at the same time when the ozone layer was being portrayed as the enemy of the world, so I didn't want anything to do with that. And I went to citrus extracts, byproducts from the citrus industry, and I now have a formula that's been tested. It's made from...
Well, I don't think you want to go into your patented formula right now. We'll learn more about that when you launch the company, and well,
America's
Web Radio is going to
what the machine does is it nebulizes this formula directly into the airflow, kills the mold, kills the fungus, kills the bacteria, and we have independent testing that certifies that. And it also, a handy little byproduct of it is that when the machine starts running again, the condensation drips off of the coil, and it cleans your entire condensate line, which I can't tell you how many homes and buildings have been flooded when that condensate line gets stopped up with algae. It also keeps the cooling coil clean so that the air, most coils are at least partially blocked so that the air, the heat exchange cannot occur very efficiently, and the air can't get through efficiently, so it saves a lot of energy by keeping your coil clean. Your air conditioner is in effect a brand new machine for forever. So it saves energy, which pays for itself, and gives you a much healthier lifestyle, life working space and living space. So we are very close to having, the engineers are working on it now. We have prototypes that were done by various universities. We very close to releasing it. It makes me sick in my heart that I didn't have it as this whole outbreak came out, because it would have been a way that all these businesses could... This is an airborne... there was a lot of talk that, you pick it up off of surfaces, but that's since been debunked. It is airborne. And keeping the air sterilized would certainly prevent transmission of it.
Well, not exactly sterilized, but rid of these pathogens.
Rid it of a substantial amount of the pathogens.
Right, and I think that would be wonderful. Well, I wanted you to talk a little bit about it because in view of what's going on today with the pandemic and the fear of it coming back, it would be timely, and when your company is ready to launch, America's Web Radio is ready to help you sell it. And
everything's ready. We're manufacturing it now. The engineers are working out the last little bugs to get it into full-fledged production. That's where we are. It should be on the market hopefully very soon. I've been working on this since 2001.
Okay, well, I'm going to call Dwight and see where we are, see where you are on that, because Dwight, I know, is handling your routine business, and
Right.
we'll see. I keep saying we because I'm the legal consultant for this startup, and so I've been doing paperwork. I'm not the engineer. Will Harris is the engineer.
It's a good thing to be aligned with. It has a lot of synergy.
Yes, I'm not the. By the way, the reason I'm the legal consultant doing some of the paperwork for Will is I've known Will for 50 some odd years. He was a high school student of mine. When I taught high school, I was in law school at night, and someday I'll tell you about that story. In fact, I do tell a story about Will to my class.
Does it have to do with the snake?
It has to do with the snake. Will's and actually, believe it or not, it has to do with some legal principles in the law of sales, which I won't go into the legal principles. That's from my class, but I do tell the story about the night, in the middle of the night, when Will Harris delivered a 9-foot boa constrictor to my house, where I was living rental house with my then roommate Roger Wren. And Roger, by the way, introduced me to someone who became my wife eventually. And so the two of us would knock on the door, and there's Will Harris with this 9-foot boa constrictor. And I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "My mother kicked me out of the house, and she won't let me back in with this snake." So I said, the only place I could think to bring it was you. I was a science teacher. And so I said, okay. So we did put the snake in the basement. We had a big pen in the basement, and we put a big water dish because boas like to sit in water. And we put a bunch of newspaper. We put a whole bunch of newspapers, tore them up so the boa can hide in there and make a nest of the newspaper. And I said, well, we got to do something about this guy. We can't keep him here forever. And a couple of days later, the snake is still there. And Roger says to me, we got to feed that snake. And I said, yeah, you're right. We really do have to feed the snake. I don't know. Let's go around to one of our favorite restaurants. And I'm not going to. I think the restaurant's still there many years later. Well, ownership is not the same. It was a barbecue joint. And so I went to the barbecue joint, and I said, and they used to keep a tab. I never had any money to pay my bills, so whenever I got paid, I'd go pay my tab. But I knew that this particular barbecue joint was a front for cockfighting, and they were racing. And so I went over there and said, look, I got a big snake. I need something to feed him. And, the pet shop wants, $3 or $4 for a frozen rat, and they got to heat the rat up and all that sort of stuff. I said, you got something, maybe an old chicken or something? I said, oh, I got this fighting cock, and he's lost his eye in the last fight. So I give you the fighting cock. Yeah, give me $1, you can have the fighting cock. Well, to make a long story short, we did put the fighting cock in with the snake, and not too much later, there was a huge racket coming from the pen down in the basement where the fighting cock and the snake were together. Roger comes into my room and says, Dag, let's go down. I want to see the snake eat the chicken. I said, all right. We went downstairs, and the fighting cock was beating the hell out of the snake. It wasn't even close. The snake was cowering. The fighting cock was after him with his beak, with his claws. We had to get the fighting cock out of there, or we would have had a dead 9-foot boa constrictor. So that's the story I tell. Now, you can say, well, what's that got to do with sales law? I assure you, I tie it all into sales law. And that's it for the day. I'll see you next week. Bye.
You're listening to America's Web Radio on the AmericasBroadcastNetwork.com. Thank you for listening.
Want to give your family or loved one the perfect gift?